There are days when life simply doesn't make sense. You look around, try to piece things together, search for an explanation, and nothing. Silence answers in place of God. The door that should open remains closed. The path that seemed right suddenly disappears into the fog, and you stand there still with a question stuck in your throat. Why? It's not weakness to feel this way. It's human. It's real. And if you're in that place right now, that place of confusion, of waiting, of unanswered questions, know that you're not alone. Many who came before you went through exactly this, and there's something they discovered in the midst of the darkness that changed everything. The mind is tireless. It cannot rest without an answer. It keeps spinning, analyzing, trying to assemble the puzzle with pieces that don't seem to fit. And the more you try to understand, the more the confusion increases. Faith in God in difficult times begins to be tested precisely there, not when everything is clear, but when nothing is. There is a phrase that God said to the prophet Isaiah that has resonated for centuries. For my thoughts are not your thoughts, neither are your ways my ways. Isaiah 55:8. In other words, there is a level of understanding that is simply beyond our reach. And this is not a flaw in God's plan. It is part of it. But here's what nobody usually says. Sometimes the absence of answers isn't abandonment. It's an invitation to trust God in uncertainty in a way you haven't yet experienced. And what comes after that invitation? That will change the way you see everything. There's something most people do while waiting, and without realizing it, it completely steals their peace. Do you know what it is? There's a silent trap that almost everyone falls into. And it doesn't seem dangerous. On the contrary, it seems responsible, even mature. It's the need to control, to understand before trusting, to only take the next step when you're absolutely certain of what comes next. We learn this from a young age. The world says, plan everything, calculate the risks, leave nothing to chance, and there's nothing wrong with being prudent. The problem begins when that mentality invades faith. When you start demanding from God the same things you demand from a spreadsheet, everything organized, explained, and predictable, and then anxiety enters through the door that control left open. Surrendering control to God sounds nice in church, but on Monday morning, when the bills don't add up, when the relationship falls apart, when the diagnosis arrives unannounced, that's when things change. Faith begins to tremble. And the question that arises isn't theological, it's visceral. Does God really know what He's doing with my life? There's a story in the Bible that answers that question in a chilling way. It's the story of Daniel. Daniel was a young Hebrew man, intelligent, upright, and full of purpose, but life did not spare him. Jerusalem was destroyed. His people were taken captive, and he was torn from everything he knew and thrown into the most powerful empire of the time, Babylon, without choice, without explanation, without any guarantee of a future. There, he was pressured to abandon his faith, his identity, his values. King Nebuchadnezzar wanted to mold him into the image of the system, but Daniel decided on something that seems simple and is at the same time revolutionary. He did not compromise his trust in God, not when the menu changed, not when royal decrees threatened his life, not when he was thrown into the lion's den, condemned not for a crime, but for kneeling in prayer 3 times a day, as he always did. Think about it for a second. Daniel had no way of knowing that the lions wouldn't touch him. He didn't have a visible angel by his side, no written guarantee, no planned escape. He only had one thing: the certainty that God was in control, even though he understood absolutely nothing of what was happening. And when the king opened the den the next morning, Daniel was alive, whole, at peace, and he said, "My God sent his angel and shut the lions' mouths." Daniel 6:22. God did not explain the plan to Daniel beforehand. He did not say, "Don't worry, you'll be fine tomorrow morning." He was simply there, and that was enough for Daniel to enter the den without collapsing. The search for answers is natural, but when it becomes an obsession, it doesn't bring you closer to God. It distances you from the peace that only comes from trusting in Him. Resting in God begins precisely when you stop demanding explanations from Him and start trusting in who He is. Daniel didn't control any of the circumstances in his life, but he did control one thing: the direction of his knees, and that choice changed everything. What if the pit you fear so much is precisely the place where God will reveal Himself in a way that no comfortable situation could ever show you? There comes a moment in every believer's life when faith ceases to be a concept and becomes a decision. Not an easy, beautiful, emotional decision, but a firm decision made in the midst of the storm, when everything inside you wants to succumb to despair. And it is precisely at this moment that a truth begins to reveal itself. God is in control of everything, not part of it, of everything. This isn't religious optimism. It's not that calendar phrase we repeat without thinking. It's a solid, biblical reality, tested by centuries of human history. The God who parted the Red Sea didn't ask Pharaoh for permission. The God who shut the lions' mouths didn't negotiate with circumstances. And the God who raised Jesus from the dead is certainly not confused by what you are facing now. God knows what He's doing. He always has. The problem isn't with His plan, it's with our insistence on trying to read it before it's time. It's like trying to understand the end of a book by reading only the second chapter. The story isn't over, and the author hasn't lost the thread of the narrative. The prophet Jeremiah wrote this at a time when the people were in exile, suffering, with no visible prospect. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Jeremiah 29:11. Notice, God said this to people who were in the midst of chaos. The promise didn't come after the storm, it came within it. God's plans are perfect, not perfect from our point of view, which only sees the present, but perfect from the point of view of those who see the beginning, the middle, and the end at the same time. And when you truly begin to trust in that, something changes. Anxiety doesn't disappear immediately, but it loses the power it had over you. God is in control. Easy to sing on Sunday. But there's a huge difference between believing it with your mouth and resting in it with your heart. And that difference will become apparent in the next few minutes. Close your eyes and take a step. Sounds crazy, doesn't it? The whole world says the opposite. See before you believe, measure before you move, calculate before you act. But faith operates on a different logic. It doesn't deny reality, it simply refuses to let visible reality have the last word. Trusting God even without understanding doesn't mean ignoring what's happening. It means recognizing that what you see isn't all there is. It means walking by the sea and believing it will part, even if you've never seen it happen before. Faith isn't the absence of fear. It's the decision to move forward despite fear because you know the one who is ahead of you. Hebrews 11 is known as the corridor of heroes of faith. And what's striking about this list isn't that they all had an easy life, quite the opposite. Abraham set out without knowing where he was going. Moses confronted an empire with a staff in his hand. Noah built an ark on dry land while everyone laughed. None of them had the complete script. They all had one thing in common. They trusted in the one who did. How can you trust God's plans when you don't see them? It starts with a daily choice, not a mystical revelation, not a sign in the sky, a simple and powerful choice to say, "Sir, I don't understand, but I trust." There's a verse that many people know, but few truly apply. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. Proverbs 3:5. With all your heart, not half, not when it's convenient, all of it. Hey, before we continue, if this message is arriving at the right time for you, click like and subscribe to the channel. This helps more people find this content when they need it most. Now let's move on. And when you make that choice, the choice to trust even without seeing, something begins to move, not necessarily the circumstances. First, something moves within you. The rigidity goes away. The need to control begins to loosen. And in place of the tightness, something you didn't expect to feel in the midst of a crisis enters, a strange, inexplicable peace that doesn't match the magnitude of the problem. This peace has a name, it has an origin, and it's closer to you than you think. Something happens when you finally let go of a weight you were never meant to carry. Your shoulders slump, your breath returns, and a lightness takes over that has no rational explanation, because it doesn't come from an explanation. It comes from surrender. Surrendering control to God is not giving up. It is, in fact, the bravest act a human being can perform, because giving up is abandoning everything with bitterness and without hope. But surrendering is placing in God's hands that which you know He can take better care of than you can. It's the difference between throwing it away and trusting. Paul wrote one of the most well-known phrases in the Bible from inside a prison. Think about it. He wasn't on a spiritual retreat, enjoying a quiet morning with coffee and the Bible. He was imprisoned, awaiting trial, not knowing what would come next. And yet, he wrote, "Do not be anxious about anything, but in every situation, by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God, and the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." Philippians 4, 6, 7. The peace that surpasses all understanding. This means it doesn't need you to understand it to work. It arrives before the answers. It remains even when circumstances don't change. It's not a product of the situation. It's a product of God's presence. And God takes care of everything: your finances, your health, your relationships, your postponed dreams, your sleepless nights. He takes care, not because you deserve a perfect life, but because He is faithful. Peace in trusting God is not a permanent state of spiritual euphoria. It's an anchor. On good days, it keeps you grateful. On bad days, it keeps you from sinking. And it only becomes real when you stop holding the helm and let God steer. But here's something almost no one talks about regarding this surrender: a powerful biblical detail that will completely change how you understand trust in God. Keep this thought in mind, because what comes next is the heart of it all. Life won't stop to give you all the answers. The questions will continue to exist. Some of them may never be answered on this earth, and that's okay. Because faith in God during difficult times has never been about eliminating the questions. It has always been about finding in Him an anchor stronger than any answer. Resting in God is not passivity. It's not crossing your arms and waiting for everything to magically resolve itself. It's acting with the strength you have, while trusting that God is completing what you cannot. It's planting the seed without seeing the rain arrive. It's praying on your knees and then rising with courage. It's living one day at a time, knowing that the God of tomorrow is already there, waiting for you. Trusting God in uncertainty is, at its core, a declaration of identity. You are saying, "I know who I am, and I know in whom I believe." Paul said exactly that before he died, in one of the most powerful statements in the entire Bible. "I know whom I have believed, and I'm convinced that He is able to guard what He has entrusted to me until that day." 2 Timothy 1:12. It is not blind faith. It is faith based on character, on the character of a God who has never failed, never abandoned, and never arrived late. And now the time has come to give you the reflection we promised from the beginning. There is a verse that most people read quickly without realizing the weight it carries. It is in Isaiah 40:31, and it was written for exhausted, confused people who no longer had the strength to continue. But those who hope in the Lord will renew their strength. They will soar on wings like eagles. They will run and not grow weary. They will walk and not be faint. Notice the order. First comes waiting, the act of trusting even without seeing. Then comes renewal, not the other way around. God doesn't renew those who already have all the answers. He renews those who dare to trust before understanding. The eagle doesn't have wings because it flew perfectly. It flies because it was made to, and you were made to trust in God, even when everything seems impossible. So, if you've come this far carrying something heavy, a doubt, a fear, a situation with no visible way out, let this message settle in your heart. God is in control. He knows what He's doing, and His plans for your life are good. You don't need to understand everything. You just need to trust Him. If this message touched you in any way, share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Leave your comment below. Tell us what you're entrusting to God this season. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now's the time. There's much more content like this waiting for you. May the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, guard your heart and your mind. Until next time.